environmental degradation is advancing around the world, the United Nations has warned that we're heading towards major planetary catastrophe. For this reason, there is a growing recognition that we must fundamentally change the relationship between humankind and nature. Under the current system of law, nature is considered to be property. When something is considered property, that often gives the property owner the right to damage it. Therefore, those who own these natural communities are largely allowed to use them however they wish, even if that includes destroying it. Rights of nature is honoring and recognizing that nature has the right to exist, flourish, and thrive. Laws recognizing the rights of nature change the status of these ecosystems to being recognized as rights-bearing entities. It means recognizing that ecosystems are living, thriving communities. Now, we're not talking about giving every tree a lawyer. We're talking about creating a guardianship so that ecosystems can be seen in court as more than just a place to stick the next future Superfund site. And this idea isn't new. It's been around for millennia. We see our legal system fail to adjust to the thought of giving ecosystem rights. We see it panic and buckle under the pressure of people-led movements against climate change, biodiversity loss, and environmental justice. Those in power are running scared. Rights of nature is a threat to the status quo. It's why local efforts have been preempted and kept off the ballot, and why we must be persistent in pushing back and calling out injustice. At CELDF, we're working with communities all over the world to amplify not only their voice, but nature's voice. If you want to learn more, head over to celdf.org and reach out. We hear you.
Well, welcome to Environmental Coffee House. I'm your host, Sandy Shellis, and today I've got the wonderful Tish Odell, who is a consulting director, or the consulting director, and Ben Price, the education director of the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund. And now this organization has been at the forefront of the rights of nature movement for more than 20 years, and they incorporate input from constituents, tribal members, living in New York in the Great Lakes ecosystems, which is near and dear to my heart. CELDF has partnered with more than 200 communities across the United States to enact community rights and rights of nature laws. Welcome, Tish and Ben. I'm thrilled to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Cindy.
Yeah.
Great.
So the first thing I want to ask about your organization is a little bit about the organization. It's quite exciting to me being new to it, and how both of you got involved, and then we'll move up to the Assemblyman in New York, and how in the heck did you get involved with my beautiful Great Lakes, because I am a former right off Lake Erie, 24 years across the street, living person. So take it away. Right. Tish, you want to go first?
Well, I think Ben, he's been here longer. He's been here longer.
Right,
and he could tell you more of the beginning history of CELDF and our work in rights of nature.
Sounds great to me.
Well, I'll have to abridge it a bit, or we'll be here for a long time. But back in 2003, I started working, doing work for CELDF, not as a full-time organizer. But the next year, 2004, I had an opportunity to get on board with CELDF and begin to do community organizing. And our focus at that point was community rights, which by that we mean that the municipalities and counties we began in Pennsylvania, but we've been working throughout the country now. But the idea that the people living in those local communities should have control over their future, over their fates, and that they should be able to decide for themselves what might be good, what might be bad for their health and safety and for the local environments. And so we helped those communities draft local ordinances that dealt with issues like the land application of toxic urban sewage sludge, or the siting of factory farms and displacing of traditional farming, or toxic landfills and so forth. So I began working with communities to help them gather together within community, kind of create community in many cases, bring people together to decide what they would be willing to do
Right.
in order to advance their authority to say no to things that are really horrible assaults on local communities, their health and safety, and their local environments. So I began to do that. And as you mentioned in the opening, in 2006, I worked in Tamaqua, Pennsylvania. It's in anthracite coal country. And without giving all the details of that campaign, it ended up that I participated in drafting the first law anywhere on Earth that recognized the rights of ecosystems to be protected by the law because the ecosystems themselves have rights. Not that they are valuable to people, and of course they are, and not that the people's rights would be harmed if the ecosystems were harmed, but the ecosystems themselves have actual rights. And so in 2006 in Tamaqua, that law recognizes local ecosystems to have the right to exist, flourish, naturally evolve, and be restored if it's damaged. And that was all in response to a corporate assault and a plan to bring in lots of toxic waste and fill in open anthracite coal mines and claim that it's a form of mine reclamation. So that's how I got started. That was some of my early work. I'd only been with the organization for 2 years at that point. And the rest is history. We've done, I guess, about 40 communities that have adopted rights of nature laws, and well over 100, I don't know the exact number on any of this, but just guesstimating, of communities that have enacted laws we drafted that were focused on community rights and local democracy. So
It's wonderful.
that's my involvement. I'm thrilled to be working with CELDF and with Tish and the rest of our compadres at
Like
CELDF.
Max Wilbert, who actually turned me on to you guys, who is a great friend of our show, and I've interviewed him twice. Phenomenal human being, phenomenal, wonderful person.
Yeah, we're grateful to have him working with us now. Yeah.
It is. You're very, very lucky. Very. He's great. And Tish, so what about you?
Well, yeah, I'm one of the people that got in contact with CELDF when I realized in my community in Ohio, which is only 10 miles south of Lake Erie, in Cleveland, was getting, I guess, a new neighbor, which was urban fracking, oil and gas drilling in my community, which, we didn't have that before, and tried all the traditional, ways that I thought our community could stop it. So, talking to electeds, going to regulatory agencies. I even then had decided to run for mayor of my community because no one else would stop it. But that's when I got connected with CELDF, because someone stood up at one of my campaign events and said, "Have you ever heard of them?" I said, "No." So I wrote it down and called them when I got home and talked to Ben here. And so Ben helped talk to me about rights of nature. And it made total sense to me. It's like, of course that makes sense. Of course nature has rights. And corporations have rights. Why shouldn't nature? And that was the very simplistic, thoughts in my head at that time. So we worked with them, and CELDF helped us. Ben helped us draft the local law for my community that had rights of nature. And we got it on the ballot, and it passed. And then, of course, two drillers who don't live in the community sued the city to have it overturned. Yeah. So that's a similar story that you'll hear
everywhere.
But so anyway, that's how I got involved. And just like Ben came on as a part-time organizer, helped other Ohio communities, all the way up to the Lake Erie Bill of Rights, which was in 2019, which then led to the Great Lakes, the New York bill. But that's a different story if you want to hear that one.
Well, we have time. It sounds like a really good paving the way story. I just have one comment. In my county, I live in the smallest county. Well, not the smallest geographically, but we are probably, I don't like to say the poorest. I say the not wealthiest county of New York. And we have, concerned citizens. We fought the pipeline, we won. The Northern Access Pipeline, we won. And we also kept fracking brine from being put onto our roads and working on the sludge issue. So we don't want that. Farming community, you don't want that poured on the roads in the wintertime at all, or even the salt. So these are issues. Your organization is near and dear to my heart, and so now I'm excited. So why don't you tell us the backstory?
Well, basically in Ohio, what happened in 2019,
Yeah.
Toledo, the city of Toledo, and it was because of the algae problem in Lake Erie.
Oh, yeah.
They had lost water. The whole city of Toledo lost their water supply for 3 days in 2014. And they attempted to, oh yeah, if you look it up, it was a
I
big
remember
deal.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and it wasn't just don't drink the water, it was don't touch it, because even
I
touching it
remember
could
it.
make.
I was still at the university, at the school, and I remember it because our PIs and people working on it were very invested from the Great Lakes Center in what was going on there. Wow.
So they then tried same thing like me and my community, working within the system, and nothing would change. I mean, more studies were done, but they knew the problem, what it was being caused by, that it was the industrial agriculture in Northwest Ohio, all the manure from the animal factories that are up there, all the glyphosate from all the monoculture, all that stuff. So we didn't need any more money for studies on that. But no one would stop the harms. So they came to us too, and we're like, well, how can we use this for Lake Erie? Could Lake Erie have rights? Could we attempt that? And so that's what we did. They did all the work. I wasn't sure if I'd hear from them again, but they collected all the signatures up there, tried to get it on the ballot, which there were legal battles by that time to try and keep it off the ballot. They didn't want the people voting. We don't like democracy, real democracy by the people either, in this country. So anyway,
We're
passed.
finding that out
Yeah,
daily. Yeah.
And it's the system. I mean, I think that's what's really key to all of this, whether it's the agriculture problem in Northwest Ohio, or whether it's the problems you mentioned in your community, in my community, wherever. The system works the same, and it's about protecting the corporate right to profit. That's the most important thing. And the people in the community, like Ben mentioned, don't really have a voice or a say in what goes on in their community. Just swallow it, accept it, and, be happy about it, I guess. Take the money if there's money involved, is what they say. But so anyway, what happened after 12 hours, the people passed it in Toledo, the Lake Erie Bill of Rights. It got a ton of media attention, which we couldn't predict. It was all over the news, including things like The Daily Show. It was even a clue on Jeopardy, which was really
wow. I didn't know that one.
Oh yeah, it was pretty funny. And then 12 hours after it passed, though, a big corporate agricultural entity sued the city to have it overturned because the law was going to harm their interests. So while this is going on, how it leads to New York is because Representative Burke in New York had seen, media coverage of the Lake Erie Bill of Rights. And so he introduced first a version of that in New York, but that didn't really get any media attention. Then when he saw what happened with Toledo in the federal court and that the judge overturned it, he contacted us again. He sent us an email and he said, you know what, could you help me draft a Great Lakes Bill of Rights? Because I now understand that it's one lake, protecting one lake isn't enough. They're all interconnected, the Great Lakes. And so we need something to protect them all. And so Ben and I helped draft the Great Lakes Bill of Rights, his first version. What you're seeing now is his second version, which has community input. So
that's great. It's a great story, but this is really such excellent. This is what we talk about. The power of community, the power of working with people for the good of all and not just for the corporate interests. I'm thanking you so much, both of you. So Ben, talk about the bill a bit.
It went through a little bit of an evolution. Tish mentioned that the first version of it was just the Lake Erie Bill of Rights that was written for Toledo specifically for their city charter. And then when we were asked to do the Great Lakes Bill of Rights, which is a version prior to the one that's active now, it expanded the coverage for the Great Lakes and the waters that drain into the lakes from the state of New York. With discussions with community members and with indigenous people about the bill as it was first time around, we found some weaknesses in it. For one thing, the watersheds that flow into the Great Lakes, that's mostly the northern part of the state of New York, does not include the full state and the waterways in the state and their aquifers and all the rest of it. So that seemed to be, we were shortchanging some of the communities in the state with that version. And so we went to work and we amended it with input from a group of New York citizens and also including indigenous folks who live within the jurisdiction of the state and their reservations and so forth. But and the feedback we got, it meant that we needed to expand it to become the Great Lakes and State Waters Bill of Rights for New York.
I love it.
So it covers all of the waters of New York.
And we have a lot of water in New York. People don't realize that New York is full of lakes and streams. And I have a creek. I mean, it's an amazing state. Wow.
Absolutely. An awful lot of it. Now, the bill goes further than that, though. We decided that, as we know from our years and years of experience, local communities, municipalities, and counties, they want to be able to have control and some autonomy over their fate, especially when it comes to the siting of environmentally destructive projects and also those that might threaten the health and safety of human communities. And so we put into the body of this bill a mechanism for the state to devolve authority. In other words, take it from the state level to the local level in terms of those municipal and county governments' ability to legislate locally and protect themselves against corporate assaults with toxic and environmentally destructive projects. And so the mechanism is in there for that, where local laws can be enacted to protect the local community and the local ecosystems. And there are exceptions because we're very clear we don't want to simply say local governments can pass any law they want. That's not the point. The bill proposes that those local governments can enact rights protecting laws, protective of the rights of people and of nature, and that there are limitations, that those laws that become effective locally cannot diminish rights that have already been recognized in other laws and constitutions, that they can't diminish any type of even regulatory law if they are at least presented as being protective of ecosystems. So whatever extent, even if it's very limited, even if it says, well, there's a maximum amount of toxins that can be put in the water or soil or air, those maximum amounts at the state level would stay in place, and municipalities and local governments could increase the amount of protection. In other words, or say none of those poisons can be put into the environment. And those local laws, if enacted on that basis to protect rights, would be free from state preemption. The state would no longer, as it does now, be able to veto those local laws and say, no, we didn't give you permission. Because according to Dillon's rule and state preemptions, the state has the ultimate final decision-making authority at the local level. So this bill would do a lot.
This sounds like it would do.
It would protect the waterways, it would protect the Great Lakes, and it would empower local governments to protect their local ecosystems, free from the concern that the state would step in and say, you can't do that. And also free from the concern that a corporation would step in. When I say a corporation, I really mean the lawyers, because corporations aren't people and they really can't do anything. But lawyers for corporate property could step in right now and challenge a local law, as they did in Toledo, and have it overturned based on the premise that corporate property has Bill of Rights protections, that they're actually corporate persons. We know they're not. We know they're actually property. But this law, this Great Lakes and State Waters Bill of Rights, would prevent that from happening. In other words, whatever privileges are recognized belonging to corporate property, they don't trump actual fundamental rights that belong to ecosystems and human beings.
So does this include wetlands also? Yeah.
Surely.
Yes. Okay. Because
absolutely.
We had an issue here. Again, I'm using the county I live in now. I used to live in Erie. I'm in Allegheny. We had an issue where there was a big, gigantic cheese plant that wanted to locate where we live. And it was the farmland was going to be sold. Hundreds of residents were against it because we call ourselves Western New York Wilds, and it's recreational and natural and beautiful. And so how is that going to fit with that kind of factory here? I mean, it was not partisan. It was just people didn't want it, and it wasn't built here. And so these are the kinds of efforts. This law, I could see this law being a template for so many states and your organization to have a foothold. This is great. It really, really makes me feel
You just said
good.
Something, Sandy. Yeah, you just said something that really made me think. That's the whole point of this, right? We have to be honest. Everything we humans do, every project, every proposal, we're going to have an impact on the environment, on nature, right? But our conversations stop always, usually, at how many jobs is it going to bring and how much revenue is it going to bring in? Whereas, see, with this law to be different, and because Ben, you brought up standing, and that the corporation, it's pretty funny, right? The corporation can't literally walk in the courtroom, but who gets to speak for them? Well, these corporate lawyers. Well, this bill would make it so the people in the community, like you, Sandy, and your community, could get into the courtroom, which right now you can't, because nature is invisible under the law, and so are the people. We don't have standing to go in and speak for the environment and nature in the courtroom. So this is what this bill would do if passed. It would allow people to go in and say, no, you can't do this because it's going to harm, the lake or our natural environment or the waters here, or whatever it is. And that's what we're seeing now with cases that are coming out of other places like Ecuador, who put rights of nature in the Constitution, which Ben was also a part of that, and CELDF.
Wow.
And and
that's
so
impressive.
now we've got examples. And so what the judges are saying is to the corporations, prove to us that your project isn't going to harm the environment. And if you can't do that, then you're not allowed to do it. So it's kind of, it's not going to be perfect, right? And there's still going to be issues, and there's still going to be court cases and all that. But right now, it's so unbalanced. I mean, the people in the community can't get in the courtroom, and nature itself, what's going to happen to it, can't get in the courtroom.
And so this is really great that way. Like you said, how are you going to prove that it isn't?
That's the precautionary principle, Sandy, and it's a very big thing in Ecuador for enforcement of the constitutional rights of Pachamama, which is Mother Earth. And they've actually had court decisions in Ecuador that uphold the rights of nature and that enforce the precautionary principle that Tish was describing. First, prove it won't do harm. Because as it stands now in the U.S. and in a lot of countries, it's the victims who have to prove they've been harmed by a particular corporate action. Prove that this molecule that caused my cancer came from their project. And it's an impossible proof. Right. And so it flips it around. You asked the question about this being a template too. And that's one of the other aspects of it that we should talk about, which is, maybe not the exact wording. maybe Wisconsin or Michigan, or maybe the Canadian provinces bordering the Great Lakes would like a similar law. Okay, we'll work with them, and we, help craft it so that it fits their community. So maybe there'll be some differences
Sure.
from the New York bill.
Well,
But
yeah.
really, imagine if you had, a international, a Canadian and a U.S. Movement where the states bordering on the Great Lakes and the provinces enacted laws that were all in harmony with each other, saying, this is a sacred place, essentially. When I say sacred, that doesn't have to be in a spiritual kind of
We understand.
remote. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
actually very pragmatic too. Why would we hold it in such reverence? The same reason we hold the right to free speech and the right to assembly and all of those human rights that we think are precious and that we're seems to be on the vestibule of departing from. But we think that it's very vital. This is an ecosystem on which life depends, and that's all kinds of life, including human life. And so,
Everything. Everything.
it,
I mean, it's
it should have
incredible.
rights.
Well, see, and that's the other thing that's so beautiful to me about not just the bill, but rights of nature, because it's helped me even like learn and, evolve in my thinking. I was raised in this same culture that you were and Ben was, right? And that's big on separation of humans from nature. I mean, that's big in our whole legal system, but not only in our legal system, in our whole cultural views. Like here in Ohio, a lot of people got mad at me even when I was doing it in my community a decade ago. And I said, well, they were all big onto the parks and that we have to protect the parks from fracking. And I said, it didn't make sense to me. I love the parks, of course. So I'm not saying it shouldn't be done in the parks. But I was like, think about what you're saying. If it's too dangerous to do in the parks. Yeah, then why wouldn't it be too dangerous to do in my community? And not only that, like people have this attitude, we have to go to the park to be in nature. And I was like, well, no, if I look out my window, that's nature. And taking it a step further, realizing we're only one species within the ecosystem. So we are nature. I mean, so these bills to me are a lot about changing people's mindsets and the cultural thinking to our connections and how we connect to nature. Then maybe the laws will follow, right? Once more people understand this, but they really don't. I mean, Ben's heard the story a million times already, but I know, but speaking to kids at college level, and here in Cleveland, it's a good university, Case Western Reserve University. And speaking to a class, and I did an exercise with them about rights of nature in Lake Erie. And I asked them to tell me their relationship to Lake Erie. And then they shared. And this one young man stood up in the class and he said, I don't have any relationship with Lake Erie. Wow. I don't care about Lake Erie. I'm not connected to Lake Erie. I never go to Lake Erie. And I kind of chuckled and I said, really? Yeah. I go, I think you have a real intimate relationship with Lake Erie. And he looked at me like I was the crazy one. And he goes, what are you talking about? And I said, you drink water, don't you? I said, it's running through your veins. Lake Erie is running through your veins. And he doesn't see the connection. So again, how can we expect people to want to take risks to stand up and really defend and protect nature when they don't even understand that concept?
Well, it's gotten worse. So many people don't have any relationship with nature. It's all cities, especially, and they just don't. And this bill, to me, this looks like a living bill. I mean, it's a living thing. And as Ben, you said, it could be tailored to the different states. And another thing I noticed is your organization's going to go up to Canada. There's a meeting up in Canada. I saw, I think.
Oh, we had that already. Yeah,
you had it. Okay, you had it. All right. But that's great, especially now with what's happening federally. This is not federal. So tell me, can the federal government interfere with any of this? Or is this really, this is the states, like they're always saying, states' rights, and this is not federal. Can either of you speak to that? How the federal government can interfere or what could happen?
the federal government and the political parties love states' rights as long as they don't interfere with whatever else they want to do.
Right.
And so, can they? Yes, of course, they can interfere. Our U.S. Constitution has all kinds of provisions for the federal government to step in and tell state governments and local governments by derivation that they've acted beyond their authority, usually in violation of the Commerce Clause that says that, the federal government, the Congress, will decide everything about interstate commerce. And you might think, well, what do environmental laws have to do with interstate commerce? Well, the shocker is that all federal environmental laws are based on the Commerce Clause. They say, well, since birds fly across state boundaries and water flows across state boundaries and all of that kind of thing, then clearly the federal government can look at that as a form of interstate commerce. Now, you say commerce, the birds aren't buying and selling. No, but Congress is buying and selling.
Sure.
And what they're buying and selling is a bunch of baloney, and they've been doing it for a long, long time. Even Thomas Jefferson in 1820 wrote a letter to one of his friends saying, essentially, that the Congress has been using the Commerce Clause to force stuff down people's throats and the states' throats to the point where maybe it's time we need to have a new revolution. That was Thomas Jefferson in 1820. He was kind of getting up in age at the time, but
Hey, also, we can be revolutionaries at any age, and you just proved it, Thomas Jefferson. Well, can this be a bill that has some protections in it against the federal government? I mean, or is it just basically it's the chips will fall, the cards will fall where they may, and go from each challenge?
I don't. There's nothing in it that says the federal government can't do something that would be
Right.
seen as a poison pill because the U.S. Constitution includes the Supremacy Clause, and that would be just seen as a blatant unconstitutional statement. So no, these are things that would have to be kind of figured out in a real political and legal struggle over the years. But I think we do want to be really cautious not to have everyone think that this is a done deal that can pass easily. This has been introduced and it's in committee, but there's no guarantee it will ever come out of committee. There's no guarantee it will ever be even debated on the floor of the General Assembly. What's needed is for the people of New York to get involved. And the simplest thing they could do would be to get in touch with their members of the Assembly and tell them they like this bill, they want their particular representative, their Assembly member, to sign on as a co-sponsor of the bill and to support it when it comes to a floor debate, if it does. I mean, essentially what's needed in New York State is for there to be some kind of a groundswell of support for this bill. And so it really is up to the people of New York. It's not up to CELDF.
Right.
We're here to help. We serve
Right.
those who come to us and ask for our assistance. And that's what we did responding to Assemblymember Burke's request. And that's what we're doing by talking as we do. It's not regularly, but we have on numerous occasions talk with folks gathered in support of this bill who are New York citizens and discussing with them what needs to happen as well. So it's got to get legs under it. Those legs are going to be New Yorkers' legs.
And that is why you're here, because I'm going to share it with this interview with as many people in the state as I can, and organizations with my little channel, and just, you share it, things like that, which is what you're saying, because of course it's not a given, but it's such a spectacular idea and premise and bill. I don't see how it could how it could be politicized horribly if it's presented correctly, because as was evidenced here in my little county, people care when they are educated enough to care,
Right.
especially in rural communities.
Well, and
Yeah.
what's really difficult too, and I mean, you may find this surprising because I did. It was a shock to me. I mean, you would think groups, there's some big environmental organizations that they have not, we've talked to them and they don't support it. I mean, even with words in their name, like they care about the water, right? Water protection.
Whoa.
Yeah. So,
Why? Because of their donors, their donor list?
I think we'd be speculating on that
Yeah.
count, but
Okay.
yeah, I mean, it's
I'm going to
possible
bring it up anyway.
if you've got an organization that is funded because it does certain work,
Okay.
and then it says, "Oh, we have this new idea. We see that we'd like to support this idea of rights of nature and a law being passed in support of it." Well, that's not what they're funded to do.
I
And
see.
are they going to lose their funding? I don't know. That's not something I could ever tell you. But
Sure.
I think there could be some concern that, oh, if we change direction, that could impact things. But there's another piece too. And that's the history of progressive organizing. The progressive movement began at the end of the 1800s, the beginning of the 1900s. So we're talking more than 100 years ago. The progressive movement was a response to the defeat, really the complete, utter defeat of a movement for economic democracy. And that was something that what's called the agrarian populists of the time, towards the end of the 1800s, agitated for. They were being victimized. Small farmers, for instance, they were losing the value of their crops to the railroads that charged them just exorbitant prices to move their grains to market. They were being pushed out of business by large corporate interests. They pooled their resources, the independent farmers throughout the country, and they created co-ops for them to compete with the big money, the corporations. They even began a new political party, the People's Party, and they ran people for president and for Congress and so forth. They had senators and Congress members elected back then. But in the end, they didn't hold on to it. They weren't able to succeed in democratizing things. The progressives, I think, looked for a way to make things better, even though they couldn't really defeat the corporate hegemony that was building, and essentially adopted the corporate model for organizing their efforts. And what we got was, well, some good things and some bad. We got the initiative and referendum process from the progressives. Wonderful. We also got the regulatory system. Not so wonderful. The regulatory system for environmental issues means that we're going to regulate the amount of harm that can be done to the ecosystem legally. And how that pans out in each state, the legislatures in each state decide what the regulations will be. So, what's the maximum amount of toxin X that can be deposited into the Hudson River, for instance, in New York, or the Great Lakes? What's the maximum amount? And how is that decided? Generally, it's the lobbyists for the so-called regulated industries that write the regulations, bring them to the legislators and have them enacted. And of course, they support the legislators that support them in their campaigns when they're looking for financial help for being reelected and so forth. So what we have on the books are regulations that meet the needs of the regulated industries. In other words, don't stop them from poisoning the environment to the amount that they have to make the profits they want. And then we have progressive organizations that demand that all of the regulations be enforced to the hilt, and don't issue the permits if that's not going to happen. So this isn't a great system. And when I say that it's progressive organizations that have supported that, CELDF did too. When we first opened our doors in 1995, that's what we did too. But it only took a few years for us to determine that regulating the rate of environmental destruction isn't the same as environmental protection. And we thought that we needed to do the actual protection, which is one of the reasons why we were looking for something else, and we moved into advancing the rights of nature as a better way than regulating the rate of destruction.
I love it. But the way you say it, regulating the rate of destruction is so disconcerting, and it's stomach turning, because this is exactly what we're seeing. I mean, even with all of your efforts and all of so many efforts of so many organizations, look where we are. But
well, that's what I say. People from, generations who worked on the Clean Water Act, and even, getting the EPA start, like they take it almost like as a personal affront sometimes, right? Like, but I go, we have now 50 years of experience to look back on. I mean, the environment, like I think I read somewhere that it's almost over 45% of the waters in the United States are too polluted to drink, fish, or swim in. So it's like, are we going to keep going down this path till it's 100% of the waters are too polluted?
God.
I mean, like, we have 50 years of experience to say this isn't working. It was nice. We don't also have a crystal ball. I can't predict 50 years from now, what will happen. I don't know if rights of nature will be a good thing or a bad thing 50 years from
if
now.
there's going to be 50 years from now.
Yeah, exactly. Right, Sandy. But it's like, so my point being, like, well, we know what doesn't work. So why do we keep doing that? Let's try something new. But it's, again, this idea that new idea is what scares so many people, because it is different and it is not what they're used to.
Well, we got to get them used to it. And
That's
the local action, even though this could be larger than that, though, this is where it's at. It really is. We can't do a lot about the big picture stuff, but we can do a lot about our communities. And this is what we say all the time. My people that come on this on Environmental Coffee House, the discussions, it's all about local community, states. What can you do? This is a natural.
So Sandy, if you think about it, and the Great Lakes and State Waters Bill of Rights, by devolving authority to the local level on these protections, I think that for one thing, it's recognizing that the people in that community actually are part of that ecosystem, as Tish said earlier, and that they're the ones who have legal standing to speak for that ecosystem, that local ecosystem, because they are members of it. It's not that they just happen to live near it. It's true what Tish said about the Lake Erie. The water is in your veins if that's where you drink you get your drinking water. Yeah. I think about the law of threes. A human being has to have air from the atmosphere of the earth, the actual ecosystem, every 3 minutes. That's the maximum we could go without air before we die. We're not an organism anymore. We can go for 3 days without water. I live near the Lehigh River in Pennsylvania. If I'm 80% water, I'm 80% the Lehigh River. Why shouldn't I and my neighbors be the ones to speak on its behalf?
Great points.
Same with the food I grow in my garden. It comes out of the soil here in the local environment, the ecosystem. If I can't speak for that little piece of ground and say it shouldn't be toxified, it shouldn't be ruined forever, who can?
Yeah.
right.
It's a natural thing for people to be able to speak for their local environment, and it's an unnatural thing for them to be told they are not allowed to.
That's
Right.
true.
It's how we talk. It's like that when you said the regulating the rate of destruction, right? And that permit makes it legal. So when a corporation gets a permit, that gives them the legal right to put that much poison in the environment. But we don't talk the way, like what Ben's just saying, right? Like, we should be able to say, that permit that's issued to put so many parts per million of arsenic into the water is actually putting that many parts per million of arsenic into you and your kids. So if you're willing to accept that much poison being put into you and your kids, we don't talk that way though about it. And we should.
And then it gets politicized, which this absolutely should not be. And I think it should be shared to, equally, all of this information, and people not to politicize it. That has to be but that's working hard to not, because everything is politicized.
Well, as far as I know though, Sandy, there's Democrats and Republicans all need water, air, and food.
And Greens and Independents and Working Family Party and Socialist Democratic Organization. I mean, everybody. So this is a bill, I think, starting in New York, that everyone can get behind, that understands. And that's another thing. Ben, you're the education component. And Tish, you talked about the student that just didn't get it. That's basic things that have to be communicated to people to say, just what you said, we are affected by all of this. So do you have in your educational component, besides the fact you went to the school, is there an educational component for this bill? Plans to, besides what we're doing here and other things?
Well, we are doing our own podcast on the bill. We've been, as I mentioned, talking to citizens of New York and educating them. And the reason to do it is so they can educate others, and so they can educate their assembly members when they're asking them to support the bill. The education is the information about the bill. Here's what it is. Here's what's in it. Here's what it would do. It is going to meet with opposition. We can look at it because we care about nature and say, well, it makes perfect sense. It does challenge some power, and especially the power of corporations. And that means the power of rights attached to property. So legal rights attached to property. But property, that's when you say nature is owned by someone else. And that someone else, and it could be a corporation or an individual or a group of people, owning that means that they have monopoly control over it. The way that a slave owner had monopoly control over the human beings who were enslaved until the 13th Amendment was enacted in 1865. Nature is a slave under current law. And nature's what we depend on for life. How can it be our slave? We're its slave if you really think about it, and not in a negative sense. We are its subject. We are dependent completely on nature for our lives.
And people don't understand it because they go to the grocery store. Everything comes wrapped in plastic. How do I throw it away?
Yeah. Our brains are just trained to think upside down and backwards. It really so. I mean, the logic behind it all doesn't add up. And that's what people have been trained not to ever peek behind the curtain. Don't ever ask the hard questions. Why should billionaires run everything or own everything? Or, why should one person with a plot of land be allowed to, say, burn tires? And then you live next to them and you have to breathe it and you have no recourse. Individuals usually can be stopped. Corporations, not so much, because they've been granted constitutional protections against municipal governments telling them you can't poison us.
Wow.
They never had to get their legislators and lobby them to give them corporate rights either, or march in the streets to get corporate rights.
No, they just got Citizens United. Yeah. Well, of course, history is.
And many decisions before that, beginning back in 1819, the Dartmouth decision that said that corporate charters are actually contracts with the state that issues them. Now, the states never said they were actually contracts, but the Supreme Court, the federal government did. I would argue legally that that's the same as the federal government intervening and interfering in a contract, because then they added a bunch of rights on and said the corporation has all these rights. They interfered. If they were right, then interfering with that contract would be a violation of the contracts clause, it would seem. But no, it's, the law is only interpreted correctly for those who have, by those who have power.
Well, I'm hoping with this one, the Great Lakes and State Waters Bill of Rights, that maybe something can come and it will pass. And it'll take a lot of people. And I'm going to do my part.
And we appreciate it. And that's about the cultural shift too, right? And that's so important, like, in that we're so superior to nature. This opens up the conversation, like, to have us think about, like, are we really? Like, can we really control nature? Or, should we?
People are taught that through their religious institutions, that man has dominion over nature. And that's a hard one when people have been programmed to believe that we can just do what we want, but the results have been disastrous. So people do have to see that.
Well, people can believe what they want, but, and I'm no biblical or scholar of anybody's religion, but I seem to recall that there are a couple of versions of that Genesis story. One of them says that, the other one says another thing. So cherry picking doesn't seem quite honest, I guess.
Right.
But at any rate, even if it says that, whatever it says, and let's go back to the original languages and all, and it'll say something different. It's been interpreted by lots of people over the years for a particular advantage. We've lost the advantage. Every one of us has lost whatever advantage that gave to someone to take that position, because we're in the process now of killing the human race, or at least a good significant part of it, and an awful lot of species on the planet. That's probably not the same as being good stewards of the garden.
Are not. I mean, there's a lot of us that are good stewards. We try within the parameters we have available to us. But when, you go to the grocery store, which is a painful experience, and you have to stay away from all of those aisles except go in and get what you want and then leave, because it's all plastic. It drives me crazy. And then what was the new article about the microplastics? Some company wants to filter your blood. They can filter pounds of microplastic out of you. Well, that's insanity. But when you start with this, though, start with this.
Instead of stopping the cause of the problem, we're going to find a medical cure that you can pay for.
Right. But that's also like carbon capture. The big greenwashing carbon capture, in my opinion, is not the way either. To stick a big carbon diaper on top of a smokestack. I mean, really, it's changing. It's changing humanity. It's changing behavior, and that's not easy now. I mean, we really are in a predicament that maybe won't ever have a positive outcome, but these are the things that have positive outcomes because they're on the local level and you can see them and feel them happening.
And every bad thing.
Talk about it, because that's one of the things. It's like you said, we've been taught this. And my one friend who's Sundance, he's the executive director of the Cleveland American Indian Movement. Okay. And he says that to me all the time, because I'll get frustrated, right? Why are they acting this way? Why can't they? And he'd be like you said, Sandy, it's because it's what they've been taught. It's what we've been taught. And so we have to actually unlearn some things and then relearn a different way. And so that's what this bill helps with too. And you helping to get this out, that all is positive. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So Tish, why don't we talk about the legislative, Burke's office, and give us a summary of basically everything we've talked about today?
Well, the New York bill that Representative Burke, who's in Western New York, for people who don't know, that's his district, had courage. I mean, it's courageous what he's done to introduce this, because I can honestly say, I think it's the first time CELDF has had any state legislator contact us to introduce a bill for rights of nature at the state level. So, and he's done it multiple times. Even though he knows all the pushback that's going to happen, he still believes in it. He thinks it's important, and he understands that it's about sharing the idea and getting people in community to have conversations. So that's our hope and our goal, so that other people in New York will get educated about this, at least take an interest, learn more about it. And they can do that by going to our website, which is CELDF.org. And so if they want to just learn about rights of nature and the bill, they can also, like Ben had said earlier, contact their legislator representative in New York. You can look this up on the state legislative website. Pull it up there, you can read it, and then present it to your own representatives and say, look, this bill has been introduced and we want you to, support it. We believe in this. Educate other community members. He doesn't have any co-sponsors right now. And so I think that's a big thing that you can do. Yeah, we need to get him some co-sponsors.
Well, we're going to put the link in the show notes for everything, but you've got me thinking now that maybe this is a possibility around here, because we are motivated for a cleaner community. And while we're not right on the Great Lakes, we are powered by hydropower in my little community. It's all the water. It's all the same
right.
thing.
Well, and this bill would cover all the water.
Yeah.
So whatever the Great Lakes. So yeah, that's why we expanded it. People in New York City, we have some contacts, and they were like, well, this is a great bill, but why can't we use it for the Hudson River? So yeah, why can't you? It is a statewide bill. So even though he's in Western New York and on the Great Lakes, it doesn't make sense.
Well, the Hudson and Lake Erie in New York, Lake Ontario, are the big things. So yes, I could see definitely this extrapolating out to other areas, and the Hudson needs it again. Yeah.
Yeah, we keep doing it. We're spinning in the same wheel, right? Same thing with Lake Erie. We let it die, and then we find causes and we clean it up a little, but then we just do the same thing over and over again. So yeah, we need to stop that. So
the
anyway,
definition of insanity. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
You said it.
I said it. Yeah, I know.
But yeah, so those are some things, and reach out to us. We have we have a podcast, like Ben said, we're going to start, Truth and Reckoning. We will have items on there about this bill. If you know people even in other states, share it with them. Like we talked about, maybe we'll find a brave legislator in Pennsylvania and Ohio and Wisconsin and Michigan to introduce it. So
fabulous. Oh, I have connections, and this is just exciting to me, because again, this is what we talk about. The big picture may be bleak, but we still live somewhere. We still breathe, we still eat, and we still drink water.
And we want to preserve that for the future generations too.
Yeah. Like the indigenous 7 generations, isn't it? 7 generations. Yep. So there you go. Wow. I've really enjoyed this, and I've learned a lot speaking to both of you. Ben, do you have anything you want to say?
Just to thank you for giving us this opportunity to talk to your listeners and to talk to you. And, this is our life's work. It's important. And we know that it's an uphill battle. And everyone else there should know that it's not an easy thing, because we're challenging years and years of really bad law that allowed us to come to this point. So it is time, and we're the adults in the room now. It's us or nobody's going to fix it. When I say us, I mean everybody listening. Yeah. And it's time to get busy.
And it's not me, it's us.
Yep.
It's us.
It's us. Thank you so much. I am grateful to Max Wilbert for opening this up. He had no idea I lived off of Lake Erie for 24 years and that this was just wow when he did. So things happen in amazing ways. So who knows? The sky's the limit, guys.
Yep.
So thank you
Sandy.
So
thank
much.
You. Yes.
Thanks, Sandy.
Yes. And please share with us so we can share your...
Oh, absolutely.
Yes. Thanks. Bye-bye.